Do you want a pre-mark?
If you want to, it's up to you. Makes it easier for me, but.
Sal, are you gonna mark all of yours?
Yeah, we're probably gonna do a lot of the same ones.
Okay.
At the application, the plan, the renderings, and the CV.
Okay.
I turned it on, I guess.
So I'm looking for the CV, right?
I'll do board first.
Right. I suggested that Michelle get our board exhibits marked in advance so we can save time.
Okay, I prefer that, so I don't hold you guys up once we get started.
Board one, board two. I'll enter the application as board three.
I don't want to get it out.
And then plans and everything else, I'll do those to you. In terms of visuals now, I have all of my stuff, and then tax record, deed, parking layout, McCarthy's review letter, day, emails tonight,
Yeah.
site plan, and then, geez, there's a lot here. These are the most recent drawings.
Is the plan that you're looking at here?
Gonna do a straw.
That site plan is.
And then come back.
Yeah, that's board three. So I guess just tell me what you want up, I will be your Vanna White.
I appreciate that.
If you, it works well on this one, not so much on this one.
Okay.
That's right.
It's on and ready to go.
Okay.
So are we doing anything besides board exhibits?
No, he's gonna do his own.
I know I worked with this out.
Sal.
I know, can you work with you? That would help, thanks, I don't wanna hold it.
You should have electronically everything emailed.
Yeah, I don't really need it if. Thank you.
That's it.
Or do you wanna take it back? They're gonna, are you gonna do it?
We resigned.
Yeah, you just tell me on the record.
We resigned in stock.
And I know you don't need the exhibits, but I do need to get it.
Are we all ready?
Yeah,
that's
I know.
I need to remember first.
Okay, all right.
So there's a copy of this.
Am I close?
We have William James,
Is he the
the president of the council.
Any other public that you're expecting this morning? Okay, I would say so, close it all the way, but if you want. Yeah, he's from the chair.
No, not
Yeah, the president.
Realtor Mitch, yeah,
Okay, and
Keith Durr,
You're getting suspended.
that kind of,
we have our mayor, Fred Lever.
Michelle, I can stop the video if we, what's wrong? Because it's running,
We have
it's since 11, I can stop and restart it.
That's your call, I mean, I think they're gonna start pretty soon, she just wants to get memes down for the record,
Okay,
so she
fair
can
enough.
ask for spelling.
I can let it go.
Ron Stanko,
who's beat me to church.
Dave Arisa. And so all those individuals, other than Mr. Jennings, Mr. Levering, just council people, no, council people.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Bill is president, council, Fred is mayor. Okay, you got that.
Yep.
And, yeah, we're missing one member of council.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Burrows.
No, that's true.
Jim McCarthy,
Give you my card.
Oh, great.
he comes prepared.
I do a lot of things here.
Speaking of, I saw an ad for McCarthy Engineering on
I haven't been in
last night, right in the middle. Yeah, it was McCarthy Engineering for all of your site development needs, location of financing and wherever it was.
Oh, engineering.
Yeah, right.
Engineering. All right, engineers we had.
And I'll see your last name.
No.
And your title is secretary.
Correct.
No.
Direction.
No, this one.
Thank you, that's why I just wanted to go, because
Okay, we call a meeting of Borough Council for the special conditional use hearing to order. And roll call, please.
Councilmember Brenner will be absent. Councilmember Jarrett.
Here.
Councilmember Vogel.
Here.
Councilmember Barnett. Here. Councilmember Stanko.
Here.
Councilmember Reeser.
Here.
And Council President Jenks.
Here. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our solicitor. We'll go through the steps and take it from there.
All right, thank you. Good morning. My name is Chris Hartman. I'm the solicitor for Wyomissing Borough Council. Today is the time which has been advertised for a public hearing concerning a conditional use application by Apartments on Van Reed LLC. And I want to explain for everyone's benefit what this process is. It is a zoning hearing, which means that it is a hearing at which the Borough Council will be receiving testimony from the applicant and any other persons who are parties to this proceeding. And at the end of the testimony, the council will be in a position to make a decision about whether to approve or deny the conditional use application. Many zoning hearings are heard by the zoning hearing board rather than the Borough Council. The zoning hearing board may hear what's called special exception applications. The zoning hearing board may hear what are called variance applications. The municipality's planning code, which is a Pennsylvania statute concerning land use, provides that governing bodies, such as borough councils, may grant themselves the authority to have what are called conditional use hearings, where rather than the zoning hearing board, the borough council itself conducts the hearing and makes the decision about whether to approve a certain use under the zoning ordinance. 2 years ago, the Borough Council enacted an amendment to the zoning ordinance to create something called a redevelopment area mixed-use incentive overlay district. And that regulation that was adopted 2 years ago designated certain locations that are marked on the borough zoning map as redevelopment areas. And within those redevelopment areas, certain uses were permitted, and in particular, there were certain incentives built into the ordinance to encourage greater density with the use of structured parking. As you may imagine, parking is always a limiting factor with land uses, and by providing an incentive for structured parking, it is possible to achieve a greater density. By way of that background, let me further say that part of that redevelopment area mixed-use incentive overlay district were provisions regarding densities that are allowed for the development. Zoning ordinances include regulations about what uses are allowed in certain areas. Zoning ordinances also include regulations about how big a lot is required for certain uses and how much paving may be permitted on a lot and how high a structure may be constructed. Those dimensional regulations are specifically addressed in this redevelopment overlay regulation that was enacted 2 years ago for uses in the designated redevelopment areas. The ordinance also includes provisions that allow, through a conditional use hearing, such as the one which will occur this morning, for the Borough Council to make adjustments to the density or the dimensional, I should say, dimensional regulations of that redevelopment overlay district. So what you're going to hear this morning is a hearing concerning requested adjustments to some of those dimensional regulations. All right, now, to be more specific about what's going on today, again, this is a conditional use application by Apartments on Van Reed LLC with regard to section 505D and section 503D of the Borough of Wyomissing zoning ordinance of 2010 as amended and the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. The application for conditional use, if approved by the council of the borough, would allow a building height of 87.4 feet when a maximum building height of 75 feet is permitted without the conditional use approval, and would also allow paved coverage totaling 48% of the lot size, which would exceed the maximum allowed without a conditional use hearing of 10% of the lot size. The property which is subject to the application is located at 521 Van Reed Road, Wyomissing Borough, in the Office Research Park zoning district, and the portion of the borough where the project is located is also located within the redevelopment area mixed use incentive overlay district redevelopment area 2 as designated on the zoning map. At this time, I want to establish who are the parties to the hearing. So the applicant will be a party, and the applicant is represented by counsel. Would you please enter your appearance at this time before I address other parties that may be here?
Sure. Sal Folino from Brennan and Folino in Wyomissing on behalf of Apartments on Van Reed LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Folino. Now I'm going to ask you if there's any other person present here who wishes to be a party. To be a party to a zoning hearing such as this, you would have the right to provide sworn testimony, you would have the right to cross-examine other parties' witnesses, and you would have the right to appeal the decision of the Borough Council. If you are present today and do not wish to be a party or do not qualify to be a party, then there will be an opportunity at the end of the sworn testimony for public comment, because this is a public meeting, and at every public meeting under the Sunshine Law, the Borough Council is required to allow public comment. But if you are not a party, you will not be permitted to ask questions, you will only be permitted to make public comment. So, there is a qualification requirement to be a party, and that is that you have a direct interest in the matter. And typically what we look at is your proximity, your geographic proximity to the project. So if you are, I would say, in the neighborhood of the project, we are more likely to agree that you have party status. If you live some distance from the project, then you are less likely to be recognized as having an interest that would entitle you to party status. And Mr. Folino will participate in our discussion on this. If anyone wishes to be a party, I'm going to be asking Mr. Folino if he has any objection. So at this time, I'm going to turn to the group and ask if there's any person here who wishes to be a party to this morning's hearing. Okay, I see two individuals back there. Can you, one at a time, please tell us your name and address?
I'm Crystal Bennett,
Can you spell your name, please?
Krystle Bennett.
And what is your address, Crystal?
539 Greenwich Street.
And can you describe how close your property is to the project site?
Across the street.
Thank you. Mr. Foligno, I'm gonna recommend to council that, Ms. Bennett be allowed as a party, given her close proximity to the project site. Do you have any objection?
Just a question if she's a tenant or owns the property.
Owns the property.
Okay, no objection.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Owns.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bennett. You'll be, recognized as a party. The next young woman. thank you.
Joy
Joy.
Brossman, Brossman.
And Ms. Brossman, where do you live?
531 Greenwich.
And again, can you describe the proximity of your property to the project site?
Right across the street.
Again, I'm gonna recommend to council that Ms. Brossman be recognized. Mr. Foligno, is that acceptable to you?
Same question if she's a tenant or owns the property.
Own the property.
No objection.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Foligno. Does council have any questions about recognizing these two individuals as parties? No. Is there any other person present who wishes to be recognized as a party? Okay. Thank you. Next, I want to make everyone aware that anyone who presents testimony will be required to be sworn by the stenographer. And at this time, we have some additional housekeeping matters, but I'm going to ask our commercial zoning officer to be sworn and let her enter into the record exhibits relating to our preparation for the hearing. So I'm going to call Michelle Baer. Ms. Baer, will you allow yourself to be sworn by the stenographer?
Hang on 1 second, I'm just writing her name down. Mr. Hartman,
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know, my husband just had heart surgery, so I'm gonna turn the volume down, but if you don't mind keeping my phone out just in case.
That's fine.
Okay.
Let us know if you need to take a break.
No, he'll be right.
Fortunately, that was not transcribed to the record.
Sorry about that.
I do.
Now we're good.
All right, Ms. Baer, can you tell us what position you hold here at the Borough of Wyomissing?
Sure, I serve as the commercial zoning officer and also as the borough manager. In my capacity as the commercial zoning officer, I prepared a memo addressed to Borough Council summarizing this application and the relief requested.
Is that summary marked as an exhibit?
Correct, it is board exhibit number 1.
Thank you.
And then in my capacity as secretary to the zoning hearing board, or in this case, secretary to a zoning hearing before Borough Council, I also prepared a public notice that was advertised in the Reading Eagle on February 7th and February 14th of 2023. That same public notice was posted on the subject property on January 31st of 2023 at approximately 8 a.m. and was mailed to all adjacent property owners located within at least 300 feet of the subject property on January 23rd of 2023 at approximately 10 a.m. The affidavit of mailing includes a label list of all property owners the notice was mailed to.
All right, so do you have an affidavit for the posting, an affidavit for the mailing, and a copy of the notice?
Correct.
And are those all marked?
Correct, is board exhibit number 2.
All right, very good, thank you.
And board exhibit number 3 is the signed application requesting a conditional use hearing.
All right, Mr. Foligno, do you have any questions about the exhibits that have been identified by Ms. Baer?
I do not.
Okay, Ms. Bennett, do you have any questions about the exhibits that the board is presenting?
No.
Ms. Brossman, do you have any questions about the exhibits?
No.
All right, thank you. So we'll accept those board exhibits as part of the record unless the board, or the council has any objections. No. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the board at this time? Or would you, will you have comments comments after the applicant's testimony?
I may potentially have questions or comments after the applicant's presentation, but I would wait to listen to what they have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, I'm gonna turn to Mr. Foligno and ask him to present his application.
Again, Sal Folino here on behalf of Apartments on Van Reed. I have Mr. Rob Hain, who will be presented as our expert. I will take his testimony just to go through some things. The property's at 521 Van Reed Road. It's part of the redevelopment area 2 of the redevelopment area mixed use incentive, which permits apartments such as this. We're here for conditional use, specifically section 503D, which pertains to the height requirements and the amount of paving. In the ordinance, as stated, permitted is 75 feet high and 10% paved area. Based on the plan that we're gonna go through in detail, you will see what we're requesting and why we're requesting it. So at this time, I would like Mr. Hain to be sworn in.
I know you gave me a card, but can you give your name for the board?
Robert Hain, Hain,
Thanks.
of Burke Surveying and Engineering.
Mr. Hain,
Wait,
can you-
wait.
sorry.
Sorry, I was trying to get it in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Is that a copy for me, Mr. Flynn?
It is. You jumped the gun there, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Do you need me to mark them or you pre-mark them?
I need you to mark it.
Okay, so we want this A1.
Yeah.
Can you leave it in front of me until we get
Yeah.
the dots? Thanks.
Will it make it easier for you if anything I haven't sent you electronically, I scan after the hearing and send to you?
You can. I don't, that way I don't need to keep them and get them back to you.
Okay.
Do you guys care if you stand, say?
No, well, as long as we can all hear you, I don't care if you stand or sit.
If you wanna come up, that's my coat, you can just throw it in the back if you guys wanna come up to the table.
Yeah, you're welcome to sit at the table.
Do you wanna do that?
Sure.
That'd be a little easier.
Just throw the coat back, sorry.
No, no problem.
Yes, no, I gave it, I started on.
Okay, A1 is marked.
Alright, Mr. Hain, can you take a look at the document in front of you?
Yes.
And what is it?
This is a copy of my resume.
And your resume indicates Burke Surveying and Engineering, is that where you work?
That is where I work, correct.
And how long have you been working there?
A little over 20 years.
And I see some initials after your name, what are those initials and what do they stand for?
First is PLS, that's a professional licensed surveyor in the state of Pennsylvania. Second is SEO, which is a sewage enforcement officer. I'm licensed as both in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay, and what's your position at Burke Surveying and Engineering?
The vice president and senior project manager.
And have your licenses ever been suspended or revoked?
No.
And your license currently in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Any other states?
No.
Okay. And prior to Burke Surveying and Engineering, where did you work?
I was not working in the industry prior to this. I started working for Burke Surveying directly out of high school.
Okay. And are you assisting Mr. Foligno with Apartments on Van Reed LLC in his project?
We are, yes.
And is this the type of work that you've done in the past?
Yes, I've been doing this for over 20 years.
Okay. And the type of hearing that you're here for today, conditional use hearing, have you attended these before?
Yes, several.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Hain, and would like to mark the exhibit as A1 and ask that Mr. Hain be admitted as our expert.
In what field do you wish to him to be recognized as an expert?
As a land planner.
An expert plan. I'm gonna ask our two parties, Ms. Bennett, Ms. Brossman, do you wanna examine the resume of the witness? And do you have any questions about his expertise in land planning? No. Does the council have any questions about Mr. Haynes' expertise in land? I see no indication that. I'm gonna recommend to council that the witness be accepted as an expert in land planning. Is that acceptable to council?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hain, can you identify this document in front of you?
This is a copy of the conditional use application that we completed for, the meeting here tonight, or today.
Okay, and did you complete this application?
It was completed by me or under my supervision.
Okay, and specifically, can you run through the details as to what specific sections you're seeking conditional use?
Yes, so, section 503D of the zoning ordinance, provides the dimensional requirements, for development in the overlay district. Specifically in regards to the maximum building height, is listed at 75 feet. The proposed building height that we have, now is measured at 87.4, so we are asking for relief to allow for, the height of the building to exceed what's listed in the ordinance. The second section of relief that we're asking for is also under 503D. It's the maximum allowable paved area of 10%. Due to constraints on the lot, we are asking for additional paved area up to 48%. A large portion of that will be pervious paving, so it won't increase runoff, but it'll allow the runoff to filter through on the remote lot, but we're still asking for relief from the requirements of the zoning
I'm
ordinance.
sorry, runoff will allow the runoff to filter through on the proposed
On the proposed parking lot.
parking.
It's okay. Sometimes I speak too fast, so I'll try to keep it slow.
Okay. And what are the unique conditions of the property that would require such relief?
The natural grade and topography of the property is such that it slopes down from Van Reed towards Greenwich, which presents a fair share of challenges for the site design. We were able to incorporate 2 levels of underground parking underneath the apartment building, which will provide a great deal of spaces for the uses in the apartments. But we did need to provide some additional parking outside of the building footprint to allow for meeting the requirements, the parking requirements of the zoning ordinance, and also to maximize additional spaces should they be needed by any of the tenants.
So as the design stands now, are there any other variances, special exceptions, conditional uses that are required other than the 2 you're here for?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And this use, the apartment building, is that a permitted use under the overlay district?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Currently, the site now, can you explain to the board what the site looks like?
Currently, the site right now is mostly open grass field. There's some wooded areas on the steeper slopes and a little patch down near Greenwich, but it's pretty much an open lot that's unimproved at this time.
Do you recall approximately how many acres?
It's about 3.88 or 3.9 acres. 3.88 acres.
Okay. David, can you please go?
Wait on them.
Alright, next I'm gonna have you look at the proposed layout. That's up on the slide, but I'm also gonna lay in front of you, or there's also that, whatever it is, pointer there, if you wanna use that.
Is that Mark?
No, it's
Me
not.
too.
Oh, this one was, yeah.
It was Mark.
No, I didn't
Oh,
write this
no.
one, just the application.
So, do you have more?
You
of these
do
right
have
now?
this one electronically though.
Yeah. I just wanna make sure I get them all. Yeah, for you.
She had it on her screen before, so ours.
Right, we're gonna start with the ones that were submitted with the application and then we'll
Mine, yeah, is B30. Yeah, I was actually, I have a copy.
some
guys
small
know.
ones.
I'm not seeing the corner one, which one's saying it, so when you speak.
Are you ready? Alright, Mr. Hayden, taking a look at the proposed layout, this was the proposed layout at the time you submitted the application, correct?
It is. I should mention that we're currently looking at making some modifications to the building that would allow for 12 additional units to what's being shown on this plan. And the location of the pool that's shown on this site plan would be relocated from the courtyard up to the roof of the apartment building.
And why those changes?
Primarily, looking at the building design, the plan that you see before you is shown with north facing up. So the southern exposure of where the sun is gonna be on the Van Reed Road side, and where the pool's located would largely be in shadow most of the day, so, it was advised to the applicant that it doesn't make sense to provide a pool there, cause it's gonna be too cold or whatever, so, the pool was moved up to the roof of the building, and with that, it's gonna increase the overall cost of the building structure, just because, every floor structure support has to be increased in size and durability to manage the weight of the pool and the water that's now gonna be on the roof of the building.
Okay.
So in order to provide improvements to compensate for that, they looked at, filling in the open ends of the building that, as you see now, looks like a W on this plan. Those, the ends of the W would be closed in, and, Michelle, if you could go to the, I think
That's
the next
you
one.
you can start.
So this one would show what the current layout that we're looking at is. The ends of the W would be closed in, so we could get an additional 12 units, would be 2 for each floor of the 6-story apartment building.
And, Michelle, do you mind going to the other, right there?
Top.
Yes, yeah. And can you explain, for the public what this shows?
Okay, so, this was a graphical rendering that was made to show, what the rooftop development could look like. So if you see on the left-hand side of this, you see Van Reed roadside orients this, so we'd be looking at the southeast corner and the portion of the building going up along the eastern side of the building, here. So you see the blue rectangle that's shown in the middle is the pool. There'd be some seating areas around that, and some other recreational spaces that would be provided for the tenants of the building. And then in the southeast corner, you have what's shown as a upper deck. In that area, there'd be a portion of the, what we're gonna call penthouse apartments would be on the southeast and southwest corners of the building. The 2 corners closest to Van Reed Road, they would extend up above the 7th floor to have sort of ground floor access to the roof above the rest of the building.
Okay, so the point in showing these changes is strictly to be transparent, correct?
Yes.
Does this change anything with regard to the request on the application for conditional use?
No, the additional structures that are being added on the roof would not elevate beyond what the tallest part of the roof was based on the plans and the application that were submitted. There'd be no expansion of the parking lot or the paved area, so we're not asking for any additional relief in building height or paved area based on the changes that we're showing here today.
Okay, so with that being said, can we go back to the original proposed layout? I think it's forward. It's up more. Yeah, I think it's up.
No,
To the right. It's the other Van Reed one, after renderings.
this one?
Yeah, I'll try that. Okay, now we're looking at the proposed layout, which we marked as A2 for identification purposes. Can you go through this layout and explain to the board and to the public what we're looking at here?
Okay,
Is that if
sure.
it works?
Alright, so, I'm gonna use the pointer on the big screen at the end of the room. Down across the bottom of the plan is Van Reed Road. Across the top of the plan is Greenwich Street. This, is the building shown in here in like a little crosshatch area.
Hey, I'm gonna ask you, because the stenographer can't put into words what you're showing with the pointer. Make sure that you say, you know, put words to it as much as possible so we get a good one. Thank you.
Absolutely. So centrally located on the lot towards the, I guess partially towards the west end of the lot is where the building is gonna be situated. The building has, you know, 3 segments here, which now we're talking about closing in on this side. But then
Which side?
on the north side of the building, apologies. There will still remain open courtyard areas in between portions of the building, so there will be open space in the floor plan for exterior use by the residents. On the west side of the property, there is an access driveway that's going to connect from Van Reed Road in the south end to Greenwich Street on the north end. There'll be a secondary access off of Van Reed Road towards the east end of the site that will curve and follow the east side of the building to come down to a connector road that runs on the north side of the building, connecting to the access driveway on the west side of the property, and also to the auxiliary parking lot on the east side of the property. This parking lot on the east side of the property here, as you can see, is displayed with a slightly different shading. That's to show that this area would be the pervious pavement. That'll allow stormwater runoff to pass through and into an underground stormwater facility beneath that. We'll have just the one access to Greenwich Street, as previously mentioned, on the west end of the site, which should be directly opposite the intersection with Oley Street. There
I'm
will-
sorry,
Directly opposite the intersection with Oley Street. There will be some additional parking provided between Van Reed Road and the front of the building, on the south side of the building. That will provide our exterior handicap accessible parking and some additional parking for the residents. There'll be an access on the east side of the building, near the south end of the building, to the underground parking level. And the access to the second underground parking level will be provided at the northeast corner of the building. So essentially, all access to the lower parking areas will be from these 2 external access points, as opposed to providing a ramp or something connecting the 2 levels inside the building footprint.
So the access point to the east goes on to the second level
Yes.
only,
Correct.
and from the north side would go to the lower level, the first.
Correct. As previously mentioned, the site runs off, it gets lower in elevation from Van Reed going down towards Greenwich. So the proposed grades will follow that. As we move north on the property, the surface grades are gonna be lower in elevation. So when you get down to the north side of the building, you'll be even with the second or lower subterranean parking level. So when you look at the building from the south side, you'll see the 2 underground parking levels as well as the rest of the building. When you look at the building from the south side of the building, you'll just see the floors with the rooms on. The underground parking will be completely covered on the south side of the building.
And is the south side of the building the main entrance, that's the front?
Correct, the south side of the building will be the main entrance to the building, and I guess the frontage are displayed towards Van Reed Road.
And most of the traffic, egress, ingress going into the building, that's from Van Reed Road?
I would assume yes. Most of as we have 2 access points off of Van Reed Road, I would assume most of the accesses, the traffic inflow is gonna be coming in and out of Van Reed Road.
Now, what is to the right of the parking lot, is that the stormwater?
To the right of the parking lot, this is the property line here, just east of the parking lot.
Okay.
And then this is, I believe, MR Ryder over here, to the
I'm
east.
sorry, what?
I believe that's MR Ryder, EA Ryder, apologies. Apologies.
Okay. Currently, how many parking spaces are in the proposed, plan, and does that change with your updates?
Currently, we have 310 parking spaces provided by this plan. There will be some additional parking that will be provided in one of the underground levels. With the current plan that you see before you, it shows the pool being shown in the north end of the courtyard on the east side of the building. With that pool being relocated to the roof of the building, that will free up, some spaces in the first underground parking level that was currently occupied by the pool and the support structure for that. Exact number has not yet been determined, but that would be in addition to the 310 parking spaces that we currently have proposed, which is more than what is required by the borough ordinance.
Okay, so there's sufficient parking.
There is sufficient parking.
Now, can you point out the vacant areas on this plan? So I know that the ordinance indicates 10% should remain, open at this time.
Right.
And we're requesting approximately 50% to be covered.
So the minimum open area is 10%, and we're providing approximately 27% open area. As you can see, there's a portion along Greenwich Street, which is not shown as being shaded in. There's gonna be a retaining wall that runs along the eastern portion of the improvements for the parking lot and the access driveway. That would be, the grades below that will be somewhat close to what they are now, and that'll be maintained in grass or landscaping of some sort. The area immediately adjacent to the eastern boundary and in between where access driveways and parking areas are across the site will be left open and pervious areas, whether in landscaping or grass coverage.
And what about the courtyard area?
The courtyard areas are gonna have some green space in them, so there'll be some percolation, but at this point right now, our calculations assume that the courtyard areas are impervious or paved area.
Okay.
The underground parking?
All right, so we're going to another slide here that shows the underground parking. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you go through this plan for us, please?
Can you mark this first?
Oh,
This is the mark.
this is part of this one. I'm gonna ask that the underground parking plan be marked as A3.
We didn't know either.
Oh,
You're wearing me out.
I'll do my best.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Haynes, can you please explain to the board and to the public what we're looking at?
Okay, looking at this plan, this is a schematic layout showing parking spaces in, the first features the upper level of parking, which would be the first level below the building. As you can see in the northeast corner here, this is where the pool was originally located, and this is the area that I was previously referencing where some additional parking spaces will be, attained by moving this pool up to the roof of the building. But you can see that access will be provided near the southeast corner of the underground parking level, and then there'll be, elevators and some storage space provided on the south side of the building near the middle. Handicap accessible parking will be provided adjacent to the elevators to allow for anyone with special needs to gain quick and easy access to the elevators and the rest of the building. The remainder of the parking provided here should comply with borough requirements for space and access as well.
Okay. I'm gonna ask that exhibits A2 and A3, which were marked for identification purposes, be admitted into the record.
Ms. Bennett, do you have any objection to those exhibits being accepted by the borough?
I have some questions regarding that.
Well, we're gonna have an opportunity for questions, so why don't we hold off on accepting the exhibits, but your request is noted.
Okay.
When you're finished with questioning Mr. Hain, we'll ask if there are questions from the other parties. Also, I want to ask you, are you calling another witness, or is Mr. Hain your only witness?
Just Mr. Haynes.
So,
You know, I just need your identity. I'll leave it here too.
Okay. Okay. For identification purposes, we marked a rendering during the daytime as A4 and a rendering at nighttime as A5. Mr. Hain, can you, first off, may these renderings change slightly based on the changes you already described in your testimony?
Yes, the renderings will change slightly. It's going to adapt as the architectural plans are finalized also, but we want to provide a conceptual look at what the building may appear like based on the design information that we have available right now.
Okay. And based on the design that we have currently, how many floors are there and how many units are there?
The design that we have currently, including the new changes, there would be 210 apartments in total. There's 6 stories, plus the penthouse apartments on the southeast and southeast and southwest corners would extend up as a 7th floor just on those 2 corners.
And are these mostly 2-bedroom units?
Yes, mostly 2-bedroom units. I believe there may be a few efficiencies, but as there isn't much call or demand for those, we're looking at mostly 2-bedroom units, and the penthouse apartments would be 3-bedroom apartments.
And do you know, in speaking with your client, who the target audience is here, who the target tenants are?
Not specifically, but I do believe there was some discussion about some students and professionals in the Wyomissing area.
Okay. Now, per the ordinance, how do you measure building height for a structure such as this that's on a slope?
So the building height is measured as a average of the building height on all 4 sides. So specifically, we measure from the ground up to the highest point of the roof on the middle of the south side of the building, the middle of the east, west, and north sides of the building, and then those heights were averaged to come up with the 87.4 foot that we are asking for relief from.
Okay. And the relief we're requesting, so the 87.4 feet, will it be 87.4 feet on all 4 sides of the building?
No, it's going to be greater than 87 feet on the north side and less than 87 feet on the south side.
So that's a calculation based on the average or the description you just gave on that, on how you measure building height.
Correct. As I said, the natural grade of the site slopes down from Van Reed towards Greenwich, so the building will appear taller and will extend more further out of the ground on the Greenwich side of the property versus the Van Reed Road side of the property.
Go to the nighttime. And marked as A5 was the nighttime rendering. Is this a depiction of what the proposed units will look like?
Yes, again, this is an approximation based on the current design information that we have available.
Now, based on your understanding and your reading of the overlay district, the specific intent section 501D, what's your understanding of the specific intent of the overlay district?
I believe the specific intent of the overlay district was to promote multifamily housing development, specifically with geared towards providing parking and underground structures beneath that, which is what the intention of this design was.
Okay, so you took that section of the ordinance into account when coming up with this project and deciding to purchase this property, or I'm sorry, in designing this project.
Yes, we did.
Has all the testimony given today been truthful?
Yes.
All right, and no further questions, Mr. Hayne. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Polino. At this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Bennett if she has any questions. And let me make it clear, this is the time at which I'm looking for questions from you. After all the questions of Mr. Hayne are completed, then I will ask you if you wish to provide testimony, and I'll have you sworn at that time that you can provide testimony. So at this point, I'm looking for questions.
Okay. I have a few.
Can you give me 1 second, Ms.
Yes.
Bennett? Sorry, I like to face you. Okay, go ahead.
My first question would be description of the retaining wall. What is it made out of? What would it look like?
So right now, I believe we're looking at two different options. One would be like a fake rock, so like a ready rock wall.
Okay.
So it would look almost like, stone or landscape blocks. The other one would be structural concrete. But my understanding is that no matter what gets installed there, it's gonna have a beautiful appearance because they're investing a lot of money in the development of the site and the building. The last thing they want is an ugly wall being part of it that would be facing Greenwich Street.
Guess my next question is, I was looking at the rendering here and I don't see anything about how many feet in between the retaining wall and like the area where North 6th, like that space. How wide would that be?
So between Greenwich Street and,
Well, on Greenwich Street, where North 6th intersects with it, how many feet between that intersection and the retaining wall? I didn't see that on there.
so between, okay, so the retaining wall so the retaining wall is gonna actually wrap around the parking on the north side and the east side
Mm-hmm.
because the elevation difference is there. So essentially, it's gonna start on, the corner is gonna be east of the intersection with 6th Street, and it's gonna extend down approximately halfway between 6th Street and Old Street.
I'm asking the green space in between Greenwich Street at the spot where North 6th
Oh,
intersects.
Okay, the green space.
How many feet is in between the retaining wall?
It should be approximately, it's gonna vary at different places, but it should be approximately 15 to 20 feet, depending on where you're at there. And that's between the right-of-way line and the wall, so there's actually gonna be additional space between the right-of-way, I think, is 10 feet off of the curb. So there's gonna be additional green space between the right-of-way and the curb of Greenwich Street. So somewhere.
No sidewalk or anything?
At this time, no sidewalk is being proposed for this side of Greenwich Street.
Okay. At this time. The vegetation, I don't even know if this is an answer you can give me regarding that.
At this point, we haven't,
My question is it going to be something that attempts to hide the wall? Or something to specifically just look pretty with the bush? Are we attempting to hide the wall? Is there any expectation to be able to hide the wall? I'll phrase it like that.
I can, at this point, I can tell you that we have not completed landscape design for that
Okay.
portion of the property.
Okay.
I can take your comments to the applicant, and we can discuss those as the project moves forward.
Okay. Are the trees that are there currently staying?
I would say the majority of the trees in that area will be removed for construction. Unfortunately,
The ones along Greenwich, the small cherry trees?
apologies, the small street trees will stay.
Okay,
The larger, what I'm gonna call wooded area,
yeah.
will have to be removed as part of development.
Yeah.
Any trees that fall within an area where there's gonna be grading, a lot of times, it's impossible to grade around an existing tree without damaging the root structure, and then eventually the tree will die anyways,
Mhm.
so it's better to just remove the tree.
I guess I meant more the decorative along the street trees.
Apologies, yes, the street trees should remain.
Okay. I'm at the corner of Sixth and Greenwich.
Okay,
If you're looking there, I'm on the right side,
I got you.
hence my concerns.
No, I understand.
I have a question about the lighting of the building, specifically at nighttime, obviously. Is there any of that would come down upon our houses, including parking lot lighting, since we are right across the street?
All the lighting will be designed in compliance with township, with the borough standards. Generally, most lighting fixtures are full cutoff fixtures, which means they only project light directly downward. You'll be, I'm not gonna lie, you will be able to visibly see the light, but there should not be light that actually, illumination that spreads over to your side of the street.
Even with the height of the building, there's no expectation of any light coming off of that building?
No, again, we have to comply with the borough standards and that the light can't extend beyond into the street and cause a hazard for vehicle travel, and also can't cause a nuisance for adjoining property owners such as yourself.
I have a question regarding the access across the street from Oley Street. Is there going to be any kind of gate or anything that is specific to tenants, to keep only tenants from going in and out?
At this point, we had not planned on something, but I could see how signage might be helpful, just to avoid cross traffic or people trying to shortcut.
I guess I'm not necessarily concerned about a shortcut per se, more like people potentially going to hang out, potential problems,
Okay,
mischief.
again, at this point, we don't have no plans for that, but I can take your comments under advisement. The council can take your comments under advisement as well, and these can be discussed throughout the land development process that we have to go through after this.
And again, this may not be something you may have an issue or an answer about. Was there any concern regarding traffic flow because it's on Van Reed Road onto North Park Road? Additional traffic. I only asked that because the Wawa recently being constructed, there was talk about additional traffic being on North Park Road, traffic jams, whatever. This is gonna add more traffic to North Park Road. Is that something that was considered?
So we are currently in the process of performing a detailed traffic analysis. We actually have a consultant working on that for us. They're going to be examining, I believe, 6 or 8 different intersections in this area.
Okay.
So there's going to be a full analysis of where traffic is at now and what impact this development will have on that.
Okay.
Mr. Hank, can you explain to Ms. Bennett what is going to be done with that traffic analysis?
So portion is as I said, they look at the existing traffic counts as far as how many vehicles are traveling at different times of the day. They will perform an analysis that estimates based on the proposed use, the number of apartment units, how many cars or trips in and out of the site will happen each day at what they call peak hours, in the morning and the afternoon. They'll look at weekends, they'll do a full analysis and breakdown on this, and then they'll make recommendations to the applicant and or the borough as far as if there's any noticeable impact to the public streets that surround the property.
And Mr. Hank, is it your understanding that will be submitted to the borough as part of that land development planning process?
Correct.
And that is a public process at which residents can attend, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that occurs in front of the planning commission of the borough, is that correct?
That is also correct.
Thank you.
That was all my questions.
All right. I'm gonna ask Ms. Brossman, do you have any questions for Mr. Hank?
Yeah, just 2 or 3. Do you have any idea what the back of the buildings are going to look like? I mean, I know you showed a rendering of what the front will be. Is it similar?
My assumption is that you'll be seeing something similar on the back side, on the Greenwich side.
Okay. How about the rooftop pool? Is that going to be noisy or will it cause a nuisance? Any problems that you can think of that?
At this point, right now, I wouldn't assume that it would be, that you would hear noise from that. And nuisances, again, it's typical that pools and other amenities are provided to people in apartment buildings, so I mean, it's something that they deal with, all the time. And being as it's gonna now be proposed for the roof of the building, it's gonna be even further away from you guys. It's gonna be separated vertically as well as horizontally, further away from you guys at Greenwich Street.
And the height of the building on Greenwich, obviously, as you said, it slopes down the way it does, so it's going to look much higher for our side of the street, is that correct?
Yes, you're gonna see at the northeast corner there, that would be the what I'm gonna say is the fullest height of exposure of the building. Now, from your perspective on Greenwich Street, the retaining wall that's on the north side of the access driveway there is gonna also partially hide some of the lower portion of the building. Exactly how much is gonna be relative to where you're standing, and the finished height of the wall, but yes, you're gonna see, more of the building at that northeast corner of the building.
And did you say how tall that retaining wall is going to be?
The
I'm sorry, I
retaining,
couldn't hear you.
How tall the retaining wall is going to be possibly?
so the retaining wall is going to be, based on the current design, we are looking at, roughly about 10 foot high at the highest point at the corner of the parking lot there,
Of the bottom parking lot area?
of the bottom parking lot.
Okay.
And then as you go up Greenwich Street, it's gonna get shorter and shorter until it ends.
Okay. So we would see more of that area then, depending on where you're standing.
Again, depending on where you're standing, you're gonna see more of the building rather than other areas.
Thank you. Mr. Hagan, just to follow up on the height, the location of the penthouse areas, those are gonna be on the Van Reed side, correct, not on the Greenwich?
That is correct.
So, from an aerial view, the highest elevation, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but, those penthouse structures will be extending above the height that is on the Greenwich side, and those penthouses will be not on the Greenwich side, will be on the, so I just want to clarify.
That is correct. There's, the rooftop structure, again, the highest point of altitude or elevation, as you say, is gonna be on the Van Reed side.
Thank you.
Chris, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, please.
I just wanna clarify your statement about the vegetative buffer. The redevelopment area mixed-use incentive overlay ordinance requires a 20-foot vegetative buffer between a project and any zoning district, zone residential, which the area directly across the street is zone residential. You said that vegetative buffer will vary from 15 to 20 feet, but the minimum required is 20 feet. So are you able to confirm that vegetative buffer will be a minimum of 20 feet across the north side of the property where it abuts a residential zoning district?
Yes, based on previous conversations, the vegetative buffer was to access driveways and parking, and that will be maintained at a minimum 20 feet from the right of way.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Since Ms. Bennett and Ms. Brosnan have completed their questions, I'm going to turn to the borough table. And I'm going to start with Ms. Baird. Do you have any other questions for Mr. Hain at this time?
Not a question so much as a statement that, clearly as we work our way through land development, if additional zoning issues come up, you understand there may be a need to either come back for conditional use or variance for their zoning approval.
That's understandable.
All right, thank you. Mr. McCarthy, did you want to ask any questions while you have the opportunity?
The other question was, I heard a bunch of things about height, and maybe easier for everyone, council as well as the parties. What's the height gonna be from grade on the Greenwood side to the roof on the Greenwood side? And what's the height from grade on the Van Reed side to the roof height on it? Kind of give you in scale Because the way our ordinance measures height, it's an average of all four corners. So this way it would at least let us know, especially I think the ladies on Greenwich, want to know how tall that building they're gonna see is.
Okay.
If you have that handy, I don't know.
I do, I have it right here. If you're measuring on the south side, as I said, because that's gonna be, you're not gonna see any of the underground parking structures. That's gonna be 83.6 foot in height. On the east side, as the grades slope down going towards Greenwich, you're gonna have 90 foot, 0 inches height. On the west side of the building, there's only gonna be 80 foot of height exposed to the building. And on the north side, where you have the two parking levels exposed, it's gonna be approximately 91 feet.
Any other questions, Mr. McCarthy?
That was all I had.
Okay, I'm gonna turn to council, ask if council has any questions for Mr. Hain.
Can I ask Jim, can I ask Mr. McCarthy a question?
Sure, but we're gonna have him sworn then, and he'll testify. So if you have a question.
Well, I'll just ask the question and somebody. If our ordinance is 10% paved, why is 48 okay?
I can take a shot at that one.
Okay.
Normally it wouldn't be, it's a combination of, they're proposing porous pavement, so their stormwater facilities are going to be underneath that parking area, which is preferable in my eyes to a retention basin, which is gonna hold water and slowly release it, and then you potentially have mosquito and insect breeding ground. Part of that is due to the topography of this lot, and you're somewhat limited on where you can put stormwater and paving without doing serious regrading. And the 10%, when Chris, Jim, and I sat down and wrote this ordinance, our intent at keeping it at 10% was to encourage structured parking and to avoid what we call a sea of landscape, or I'm sorry, a sea of asphalt when you're driving past a property, that you just see this wide expanse of exterior parking. I think this applicant is trying to do the best with what they have in terms of they're getting as much interior parking underneath the building as possible, while keeping in consideration they can't squeeze everything underneath that building and make it work. So it's cost prohibitive to do structured parking, multiple levels, and they're still giving us surface parking that's permeable and allowing for stormwater to filter through while trying to meet the intent of the ordinance as much as possible.
I guess the concern is that just making sure that there's some sort of engineering studies that have been done to make sure that our infrastructure in that area is sufficient to take care of all that water. So once they get into the storm sewer, just make sure our infrastructure over in that area is sufficient to take it away from, we don't end up with flooding problems.
To not speak for Jim, but speak for Jim only because he's not sworn at the moment. To the best of my knowledge, this is not in a known drainage area that we have any type of stormwater issues. And the intent to that underground facility is it's not entering our storm sewer system, it's staying on site.
Oh,
I have a question. Is it possible that some of the driveway and parking that's outside of the building be converted to pervious surface like the other parking lot?
It is possible, but you generally don't receive the benefits of having pervious pavement there, because unless you have a structure beneath the pervious pavement that can capture the runoff that filters through the pervious pavement, generally when we construct a new driveway on fill such as that, you have to roll and compact the soils underneath it, and if the runoff permeates through a pervious pavement, it's not going to soak into that ground very well, and then it's just going to end up running down the surface of the driveway anyways. So generally we try to utilize pervious pavement in an area where there's lesser slope and where there's a place for the water to go as it passes through the pervious pavement.
Okay, so it's based on the amount of slope that's present along the east side, that driveway, and the parking lot on the south side.
Yes, besides
East side.
besides the slope and grade, it's also The existing soils have certain limitations, so there may be a layer of clay or bedrock or something such as that, we have to avoid or provide physical separations from any stormwater infiltration facility in order for it to adequately function over an extended period of time. So if we have to cut or fill and compact that fill, then again, you're not gonna have good permeability of the soils beneath the constructed roadway. And therefore, the pervious pavement is not gonna give you the benefits that you want.
Thank you.
Has fire looked over this? And they're okay?
I mean, I'm sure they'll have additional review comments during land development, but they had no adverse comments at this point in time.
What is the distance between what's designated on this slide, it says courtyard, how do you call that, to the building? What's that distance between the two?
Between the two, I think is approximately 40 feet. But those ends will be closed off there by the new changes that we're adding. But with the driveway layout that we have, we are providing access around all four sides of the building. Generally, most fire protection minimum is 3 sides of the building. We want to make sure, based on the residential use, the number of stories of the building structure, that we provided access around the entire building. We have reached out to the fire marshal, and he has reviewed the plans and had no concerns about layout. We're still working through some details that'll continue through land development for location of hydrants and fire department connections in the building, and so on and so forth.
Thank you.
If Borough Council does not approve the request to allow you to build 12.5 feet higher than currently allowed, what's the practical effect on the building? You simply not have the 2 penthouse apartments, you not have 1 floor, what does that mean for you?
I can't speak to that, honestly. You know, we looked at this from the standpoint of, I think when we had conversations with the borough, there were other structures and developments that had happened in the overlay district where higher levels of building heights were already, relief was granted. So we felt that where we were at was pretty safe with working with the elevations, the natural grade of the site as such as exists on this property, and the overall building height based on the average across the building.
The answer is you don't know.
That's, at this time, I don't have an answer for where we would go if that would be done.
Can you describe how the 12.5 feet would affect folks who live across the street?
Specifically, there would be an additional building height, the building would be higher, yes. Apparently, there's really not a better explanation than that. As it's based on an average, it's.
But is it going to look 20% bigger from their standpoint? Is it going to look 5% bigger? I mean, it looks massive from your picture, and that frankly doesn't show how it looks from their perspective.
Right. So 12.5 feet is a 0.2, basically another story, but it's not as simple as saying that it's another story on one side of the building, because it's measured as an average across all 4 sides. But the best answer I can give you is you could point an extra 12.5 feet to approximately another floor, another story.
May I ask a follow-up to that?
Please do.
Alright, the penthouse, the new proposed penthouse apartments, that, even without those, you still would need the relief you requested, correct? They're not because of the penthouse alone.
Correct.
You say you're building, there will be more parking spaces than required by the borough. If you only had the number of parking spaces required, would that allow more, say, open space, more grass, more trees?
It would. There's generally concerns that providing just simply the minimum 1.2 spaces per apartment unit might not be enough to actually meet the needs of those apartments, and we felt that weighing the options, that it would be better to not have a detrimental impact of something like cars parking on Greenwich Street to serve the apartment building. It's better to maximize the parking that we can provide on the lot to meet the needs of the development.
How many more, what's the excess number?
So, based on the current numbers, we're providing 310. The requirement would be 252, so we're looking at approximately 58 additional spaces.
But that would keep them off the street. Which is better.
Over safety, not with the bikes, so.
Just saying, in that 310, and the 310 would be the constructed, the 252 is the required. The 252 is based upon the additional units, or takes into account the additional units with closing off the courtyard, is that correct?
Correct, that accounts for 210 apartment units at 1.2 spaces per unit.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies, 210 apartment units at 1.2 parking spaces per unit.
Any other questions from council for the witness?
Yeah, with regard to the item that Keith mentioned, which is the water runoff, it sounds like the anecdotal information is that this area, we know what this area is capable of maintaining. Is that how you guys arrived at how you're doing the pervious and the underground? Or has that been actually, has there been a study done to confirm that our thinking is accurate here, that we're not going to find that it's not going to work when we start digging?
So we've done numerous tests on site, excavations, and had consultants review and analyze the soils to make sure that this underground stormwater solution would be something that's feasible.
It sounds pretty innovative. The last thing you want was your car floating around in this area because it didn't work.
No, absolutely. I mean, generally through DEP permitting for site construction, we're required to do post-construction stormwater design and analysis. That includes managing runoff volume through a groundwater recharge or seepage bed such as this, or maybe it's just a surface basin that allows the water to percolate into the subsoils. Also, we manage the peak flow of runoff from the site, which is the rate or the velocity, or how fast and how much water is running off during different storm waves. So what's coming into the storm sewer along Greenwich, which is where this site drains to, should not be increased by this proposed development.
Okay, I have one other question. It may not be relevant, I'm going to ask it anyway, because it will be relevant to the folks that live there. You've got a green space here. Are you contemplating families living in these apartments? And if so, kids running around outside, and where are they going to run? Or is that some off limits with this green area? Is it one of you?
What is your question, Ron?
If there's children occupying these 210 apartments, and you've outlined what the outside's gonna look like, I didn't see any swing sets or things like that, or places where kids are gonna run around. Is that part of this discussion, or will that come later?
Well, there are some, I think Mr. Hayne would testify that there are some recreation facilities on site on the roof. Is that correct, Mr. Hayne?
Yes, there'll be areas on the roof and within the courtyard areas that'll be open space. What improvements, I can't speak to because that design has not been completed yet.
Okay, Mr. Hayne, are you familiar with the requirement of the redevelopment area regulations that requires a contribution per unit to recreation, so that the development would be required to help fund public recreation for the borough?
I'm familiar with it, but not the specific details.
All right, well, let me refresh your recollection.
I'd just like to interject. I think the feeling for a number of people on the planning commission is that an avenue for recreation, the roof is probably not one that we think is the main way to handle kids running around, going
Mr. Hain, the ordinance at section 504D, paragraph 4, I believe provides that a recreation impact of $500 per residential unit shall be paid to the Borough of Wyomissing at the time of land development plan approval, and installation of on-site recreation improvements as part of the project shall not reduce the developer's obligation to pay such fee. Are you familiar with that regulation?
The summary is what I was familiar with, yes, that the recreation fee will be required and, based on the number of units, there'll be a considerable contribution to, Wyomissing Borough for recreational facilities wherever they deem, to be the best place to spend it.
Thank you, Mr. Hain.
And if I-
Go ahead.
before you finish, I'm pleased that you want to have adequate parking so that people don't park in the neighborhoods. But one thing that will drive them to the neighborhoods is if they are charged for parking and have the option of free on the street parking. Do you know whether the intention is to include parking in the fee for the apartments so it doesn't give people an incentive to take up the spaces in the neighborhood?
I've not been involved in any discussions on parking where, fee parking was discussed. My assumption is that the parking is going to be provided for the tenants and the tenants alone.
Right, but sometimes apartments charge tenants for parking spaces. And if, to the extent that's charged, that's going to give folks an incentive to park on the streets and change the character of the neighborhood.
As I said, I can't speak for the developer, but there have been no discussions on regarding paid parking on this property.
Are there any other questions from council? Is there any follow-up, Mr. Polino, that you want to ask your witness?
No, I have no follow-up. I'm just gonna have to submit my exhibits before.
Okay, we won't forget that. Ms. Bennett, any final questions for Mr. Hain?
I don't believe so.
And Ms. Brosman, any additional questions? Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask, Ms. Brosman, would you like to provide any sworn testimony? Well, actually, I've been going in order, so I'm out of order, but that's all right. Ms. Brosman, do you want to provide any sworn testimony?
Sure.
All right, would you allow yourself to be sworn by the stenographer?
Yes.
And I need to plug in, sorry. Here. There, I have my plug right here.
Airport.
Okay, Ms. Brosman, I have to turn again, but can you give me your full name again?
Joy Frostman?
Joy, you said?
Yes.
Okay, Brossman.
M-A-N, yes.
These chairs swivel, but I'm like sunk down in it. Terrible. Raise your hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I definitely have concerns. I've lived in this property for 18 years. My kids play there. I'm worried about if there are gonna be more children, how is that gonna affect busing? Because I can tell you right now, some busing in that area is already horrible. I'm worried about the mischief and any possible problems with people around there because it is very quiet. There are no houses across the street from us currently. So I'm not saying this isn't a good idea, I just worry about what potential problems they're going to cause. They brought up the parking. We have no one parking on that side of the street, so it's been very open to us. We have no driveways, we must park on the street. Are we gonna lose parking places in front of our own homes? That's a concern. I am very concerned with the fact that I have a tiny home that I'm gonna look out my window and I'm going to see 90 feet of a building in front of me. That's humongous. I mean, I see the sun currently. That's gone. There will be no sun. So I'm not real excited about that, looking out my window and not seeing that anymore. So yes, I have a lot of concern about this building. Making it even higher than what is allowable definitely upsets me. Again, I have no say in this, but if it affects me, and I'm not even right behind that building, whereas there's probably 10 other homes that are directly behind that building, that's gonna affect them even more. I think that's pretty much all. I understand change, I understand progress, but it's definitely going to be a huge difference from something that we've been looking at for 18 years. Now, skyrise.
Thank you. Mr. Polino, do you want to ask any questions of Ms. Brosnan?
Were you involved, did you show up to any hearings when the overlay district was being implemented 2 years ago?
No.
I have no further questions.
Does council have any questions for Ms. Brosnan? Ms. Bennett, do you have any questions for Ms. Brosnan?
My question here at home.
Michelle or Jim, any questions for Ms. Brosnan? Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Bennett, your turn. Would you be sworn by the stenographer?
Bennett first name.
Crystal, Krystle.
A-R-Y.
STLE.
I guessed. I had it wrong the first time. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Okay. Also.
My concerns, obviously besides the building being built, if it was to be built, it probably will be built. The visual appeal for the neighbors that are living there currently, that yes, we have smaller houses, older houses. Mine was built, it's a World War II house. So it's 2 stories, it's an older home. We appreciate having the green space in front of us. I've been living in my house since 2015. I know, maybe a little bit unrelated, Ryder that owns this property that the apartments are going to be built on. When we moved into that house, Ryder themselves had a green barrier that separated the view from their construction company from us across the street. For whatever reason, and I know it's private property, that green barrier was removed. So we now have a view of the construction company. And up until maybe 6 months ago, I would say, we had a view of trailers in the back of the construction company. Fortunately, the trailers have since been removed. But we still, in other words, we still have the view of the construction company. There's no green barrier. So now, next to that, we're losing that green area. So I guess I'm just disappointed in the fact that, we're losing what green area we have that we can see when we walk out of our homes. I would at least ask if I'm to walk out and I see a wall across the street, if there could be substantial vegetation. We have those small burrow trees. They bloom pink in the springtime. I appreciate them. I'm glad to hear they will stay, but there has to be some kind of, it's why I'm missing, green to see. That's my request.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Does council, Mr. Polino, do you have any questions for Ms. Bennett?
Yeah, do you understand that after this process, the plan goes to land development and, Borough Council will have, the option to, require certain additional items be implemented, with regard to perhaps material, vegetation, things of that nature. And at that time, they usually do take input from neighbors but do you understand that that is the process?
Not until you said that, but I will make sure that I attend,
Okay.
is my part.
And since approximately 2 years ago, I know it's nice looking out at the green field, but it is zoned, it does have a certain zoning classification, and there was an overlay district implemented. Were you aware that that overlay district was being implemented, and did you attend any meetings or anything?
I was not aware at the time. Since receiving the notice in the mail, I have read into it. I am familiar with it now. I understand it. Does not take away from my appreciation for the green space.
I understand, and that's all I have, thank you.
Does the council have any questions for Ms. Bennett? Michelle, Jim, any questions? No? Okay. At this time, I'm gonna recommend that the exhibits that were presented by Mr. Polino be accepted in the record. Ms. Bennett, Ms. Rossman, do you have any objections to the admission of the exhibits that were presented by the applicant? You're shaking your head no, I think
No,
that is, you're okay. So, I'm recommending council that you accept those exhibits, make it part of the record. And at this time, I'm recommending that we close the testimony, close the record, and next ask if there's any public comment before we have deliberation or the possibility of deliberation by council. Is there any question about that process moving forward? If not, then I'm going to ask if there's any person present who wishes to offer public comment. Mr. Jadick, can you identify yourself?
Adrian Jadick, 48 Cardinal Road. Just, I think I did not catch this, if it was on the record, how many stories, so that's just for the record. How many stories will that be at the back? Second question, I agree that it would have been beneficial to either relieve the concerns or to raise more concerns of the neighbors to have a rendering of the back. And given the cost of this this development, I don't think the drawings, I'm familiar with that process, creating a model or even a 3D model, that would have been better to so people can understand what to expect there. Like I said, maybe their concerns are alleviated. I think transparency and having that available would have been better. And the third is shade. Again, an AutoCAD can simulate the movement of the sun. The sun is underneath here, the south is down in that thing. So yes, like they say. But the question is, again, if we have this, it's the transparency. How far, how many properties are going to be now transformed from sunny properties into they're never going to see the sun ever again. So I think that would have been beneficial. Maybe it's not, maybe this is not a concern, but that can be produced easily and shown at this hearing so that we know and you know how deep and how big, is there a problem or is not a problem? Maybe it's not, and then the residents, but definitely, you know, just with my mind, those properties are sunny properties. I've walked those streets several times and it's nice and sunny there. And if this becomes, the quality of life and it will change dramatically for all those residents. And like I said, I think it would have been beneficial to know how many. Maybe they're gonna be 5 houses deep, they're not gonna, I don't know. We really don't know. That's it, thank you very much. So, yeah, the first question, real question was how many stories. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Katie.
Okay.
Is there any other
There,
questions?
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Stefano Felino.
I'm sorry?
Stefano Felino, I'm the developer of this property. I just wanted to answer some of the questions. The parking will be free. It'll
Right,
be
Mr.
parked-
Folino, because you are the owner, I would appreciate if your council agrees to have you sworn, so, and to, I would request all the parties agree that we'd let Mr. Stefano Folino add some testimony to the record. Is that okay with council? I would like us to do that. Okay, we're gonna open the record. Mr. Folino, would you allow yourself to be sworn?
Yes.
Spell your first and last name.
Stefano, Stefano, Folino, Folino.
Just check. Raise your hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you again state your name for the record?
Yep, it's Stefano Folino.
Can you spell your first name?
Sure, Stefano.
Very good. And are you the owner of the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. You wanted to make some comments. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to answer some of the concerns that some people had. First of all, the parking will be free. There wouldn't be any charges for any of the underground or surface parking. Regarding the children's playing area, we have an enclosed, open courtyard that kids cannot fall, that will have amenities for kids on site. It's gonna be closed in, so they're protected. And there'll be 2 areas of courtyard, so there'll be plenty of room for multiple or all kids in that area to play. Regarding the walls, for a building this size, we're definitely gonna make, a visual, beautiful wall, and there is gonna be visual plants, we're gonna make it very pleasing to everybody, just because the building this size, so.
Thank you, Mr. Folino. Now that you've made yourself available, and I appreciate that very much, does council have any questions for Stefano Folino? Seeing none, Michelle, do you have any questions for Stefano Folino?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna turn to Ms. Bennett and ask if she has any questions for Mr. Folino. Ms. Brosman, any questions for Mr. Folino?
I do have one.
Okay.
Have you looked into Wilson School District at all? Do we know how that might go if there are a lot of families with children?
Yes, I believe Rob can answer this better, but I believe there was studies done, and we did reach out to the school.
Do we know if there would be extra busing or?
They
We
did
don't know at this
not
point.
say anything.
Okay. It's a tough one right now. It's a definite
Yeah.
concern for us.
Okay.
Okay.
Since Mr. Folino referenced Mr. Hain, do you know anything about communication with Wilson School District?
Unfortunately, I do not, I was not personally involved in the communications with the school.
That is something, again, that might be inquired about during the land development planning process. Is that something we could look into, Ms. Bayer? You're saying yes?
Yes, I can speak to their superintendent.
Okay. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Rick Weinhofer, 801 North
I'm
Ninth.
sorry.
Rick Weinhofer, Weinhoffer,
And your address?
801 North 9th Street. I just wanted to come to speak a little bit about the playground situation in the Heights. The closest playground to the proposed lot is the Berkshire Heights Playground. It is one of the older playgrounds in the borough with some of the oldest playground equipment. The structures there are close to 30 years old. We have been unsuccessful in securing grant funds over the past 3 years to help renovate that playground. At this point, the estimate price tag of that project is starting to close in on around $300,000. So my request to the developer is that if you would be at all able to consider any additional in-kind donations to help further improve the parkland that we have there.
Thank you, Mr. Weinhofer. Developer's here, he's heard your request. At this point, we've completed everything up to the point of a decision. And at this point, I'm gonna turn to council and say, you have the option of making a public decision right now. You have the option of requesting an executive session at which the board can ask me legal questions and deliberate on the testimony that you've received. Or you can announce that we are finished for today and will resume the hearing at another point solely for the purpose of announcing a decision. And if we're going to do that, we should say when we might be ready to announce a decision. Are there any questions about how to proceed? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. Is it not possible for us to adjourn this meeting, and since we've garnered all the information that we've gotten through the testimony of all the people here, for the plaintiff to come back with another look at what has been discussed here to see whether that changes everyone's perspective on what may or may not be an issue going forward.
What are you asking for, like a rendering or some, or?
Well, I would say the two folks that came here to spend some time with us and explain what their concerns were, if the developer has responses to that, that would be worthwhile. It might be worthwhile, as well as some of the comments that Donna mentioned regarding the recreation, and Weinhofer mentioned as well with regard to recreation. It may bring all those facets together in a different light, with us listening to what the plaintiff has to say about it.
But if I'm understanding it correctly, we have, at this point in time before land development, we have nothing to do with the recreation, we have nothing to do with school busing. All we're here to decide is whether we're gonna grant two issues, additional 12 feet height and 10% versus 48% drainage and impervious parking. So none of those things are relevant to the decision we need to make today.
Well, I agree with what you said, but we heard from the two folks that were here who talked about a lot more than 12 feet and 6 feet
But
wide.
that's land development, that has nothing to do with the variance and the special meeting we're having today. So I'm not sure why we wouldn't make a decision on those two issues.
That's fine.
Because we're not debating whether the building's going in, that's gonna become later, and what it's gonna look like is all gonna come later, so I'm not sure why we would delay this any further.
There's no need to.
I would respectfully request we go into executive session just for a few minutes, so Jim and I can discuss some potential conditions, assuming you're willing to grant any type of relief that be tied to the decision.
I think that's an advisable suggestion. So, in order to go into executive session, we could either leave the room and leave the audience here, or we could,
The stories in the back, we never had that answered. How many stories in the back?
That was very public.
that was public comment.
Oh, fair enough.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask council, Jim and Michelle, we're gonna go to the library and ask everyone else here to please wait a few minutes. So the hearing is temporarily adjourned. Or recessed, sorry. That's fine, I just don't wanna run over your flow.
Okay.
The Borough Council has conducted an executive session, and based on the discussions at executive session, I'm going to make offer a proposed motion, and if it is acceptable to council, someone should make a motion in favor of that. So the proposed motion would be to grant the conditional use application as submitted with the following conditions. One, that the Greenwich Street retaining wall must match the building facade and is subject to, the design is subject to approval by the borough engineer and borough manager. Second, that the 20-foot minimum landscape buffer along Greenwich Street must be complied with. Third, that a 0.0 foot candle light emission standard shall be required at the property line and cutoff fixtures shall be required. Fourth, that building exterior lighting must not throw lighting on neighboring streets and properties. 5, all land development approvals and other necessary outside agency approvals must be obtained. 6, that the payment of recreation fees as required by the ordinance shall be required at the time that a building permit is issued for the project. 7, that the parking on lot shall not be fee-based, that tenants will not be required to pay for parking spaces. 8, that the existing street trees along Greenwich Street shall be maintained or shall remain. And 9, that the school bus situation relating to the addition of the project shall be resolved with the Wilson School District, and the borough shall be notified of that, what that resolution is. That's my proposed decision, and now I leave it to council to decide whether that's acceptable.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
I'm going to turn to the three parties, Mr. Polino representing the applicant, the other three parties, and make you aware that there will be a written decision, which will include the decision that was made by council today. That will be issued within 45 days. I hope it will be significantly sooner than that, but no later than 45 days from today. And that any of the three parties have the right to file an appeal to the Berks County Court of Common Pleas within 30 days after the issuance of the written decision. Do you have any questions about the decision or about a procedure going forward? I see no indication of that. Thank you all very much for your participation today. Have a good afternoon.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.